guy has a record on movies, on music, on streaming offerings. He is our light in the night. He comes and goes on a rainbow. He is the magnificent Michael Snyder, everybody. The Culture Blaster.
Hey, I'm not Bruce Springsteen, but I am voting for Harris and Waltz.
Okay.
And wait, Mark, before we go any further, any more anecdotes? I just want to get them out of your system while I can. Give me an anecdote or two. Mark.
I told you he wouldn't be happy.
Don't talk to me that way.
Exactly.
Mark, they say celebrity deaths come in threes. And so the past few days I've seen the passing of Dame Maggie Smith, Chris Christopherson, and Pete Rose, three all-time greats in their respective fields. But what people don't ever talk about is that for many years they were a throuple. That's right.
That was very inappropriate.
Wow.
Love's a mystery, Mark. Speaking of mystery, we're in October, one of my favorite months of the year. Halloween's coming up. And in the spirit of fun and frolic, tomorrow night at the Cat Club in San Francisco, Booty Mashup is doing their Disney party. So if you're a Disney kid who loves to dance and hang out and want to get into the middle of the happiest place on earth, that would be Booty at the Cat Club on Folsom in San Francisco.
Those are great shows, those Booty shows, for sure.
Yeah, Adriana and Jupiter and the rest of the gang are going to be putting on. They'll be like lip syncy things. It'll be a lot of fun. But we're really here to do film reviews, and I think we should get going. What do you say?
Yes. Also, it's mentioned John Amos died. Yeah,
a number of people passed away, but he wasn't in the thruple.
He wasn't. Okay, you're sure of that?
He was a zaddy into good times, though. I'll tell you that. That's John Amos, a handsome man. Insofar as this is the 50th anniversary year of NBC's stalwart sketch comedy show, Saturday Night Live, it kind of made sense that director and screenwriter Jason Reitman's engagingly frenetic docudrama Saturday Night is hitting theaters. I mean, Reitman's connection to the long-running series is almost genetic. His father, Ivan Reitman, was the filmmaker responsible for the SNL-adjacent comedy Ghostbusters, bringing it to the screen, a movie that featured two of the earliest SNL cast members, Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray. And true to that legacy, Jason directed and co-wrote Ghostbusters Afterlife, the recent and quite satisfying sequel. And now Jason Reitman, abetted by his Afterlife co-screenwriter Gil Keenan, has delivered Saturday Night, which purports to show in real time the unhinged 90 minutes that preceded the broadcast of the very first episode of what was then simply called Saturday Night, because at that time there was an ABC variety show hosted by Howard Cosell and called Saturday Night Live. And when that tanked, they ended up, grabbing the title, and the rest is history. So at its start in October of 1975, SNL was, let's say green, let's say untested. It featured the not ready for primetime players, Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Chevy Chase, Gilda Radner, Jane Curtin, Lorraine Newman, and Garrett Morris. And the movie is a portrayal of what went down to get this thing on the air, and there were pitfalls, and there were NBC executives that wanted to scotch it. They had a rerun of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson sitting ready to go in case there was some kind of failure. This was going to be live. Again, there was skepticism there. In any case, the movie also features, in addition to a bunch of young actors playing the not ready for primetime players, the first episode's musical guest, Billy Preston. You see writers, including Al Franken and Tom Davis. You see the show's first guest host, George Carlin, and many, many others. But appropriately, since this is about the conception of SNL, the most prominent person depicted is co-creator and showrunner Lorne Michaels, who at the time was a little-known Canadian writer and performer. And with NBC employee and eventual network sports maven and interim SNL showrunner Dick Ebersol, he launched the show in front of this host of skeptical executives. I got to say, it is the cast led by Gabriel LaBelle, who, by the way, played Steven Spielberg, the role based on Spielberg in The Fabelmans, as Michaels here. And this cast is what makes Saturday Night work, even as the kinetic doings on screen come at you fast and furious and feature bits of skits and interactions that actually couldn't have and didn't occur during that hour and a half ramp up to the broadcast. I think they're there as Easter eggs and to give a certain sort of sense of verity and what was, beloved and important. For instance, there's a moment where the actors playing Franken and Davis, who are quite good. The guy playing Al Franken looks like a young Al Franken. They nailed that. But they are with Dan Aykroyd, played by Dylan O'Brien, who people may know from TV's Teen Wolf. And they're working out the soon-to-be famous and fake blood-drenched Julia Childs skit that wouldn't air until later in the series. So it's all like, look, it's Saturday Night Live, There are hints of Chevy Chase's eventual departure from the show and so on. That said, O'Brien, Corey Michael Smith as Chase, Ella Hunt as Gilda Radner. There's a moment where the character of Gilda Radner, as played by Ella Hunt, she's wrapping up a little, a little rehearsal. And when they're done, she skips off to another part of the studio. And her physical embodiment of Gilda Radner's joy and kind of youthful verve just nails the character. There's also Emily Fain plays Lorraine Newman. I guess the best known actor who is portraying one of the players is Lamorne Morris, who just won an Emmy for his work on Fargo and is the guy in the BMO ads. But he's absolutely great as Garrett Morris, no relation. They do little bits and skits that tie into things. You actually get the son of Philip Seymour Hoffman, Cooper Hoffman, as Dick Ebersol. And Ebersol was kind of always I always had kind of a slimy vibe about him. And Letterman used to talk about him being drenched in aftershave and all this other stuff. They nailed it. You also get Willem Dafoe as the main NBC network executive who is hoping for the show to tank and has the Johnny Carson episode poised to go. He's great. Unbelievably, Matthew Rhys of The Americans and Perry Mason plays George Carlin, unrecognizable. John Batista's Billy Preston and J.K. Simmons as old line TV superstar Milton Berle, who is the antithesis of everything that Saturday Night Live is about. All of them together make the trip really worthwhile. And again, the frenzy is fun, and it's not really what those 90 minutes before airtime were like in terms of what goes on screen. But I enjoyed it, and I had a good time. And there was a show called Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip that Aaron Sorkin did, and he tried to show what it was like backstage at one of these sketch comedy shows. This is way better in terms of dealing with that. It may be shallow, but I dug it. Saturday Night is in theaters.
Wow, he really gave it quite the hug. By the way, you used the word abetted, sir, did you?
I may have.
Yeah, and you used the word purported, did you? Yeah,
I may have.
And the word verity. All right.
Entirely possible.
Others have been noted by Tom, who is the keeper of the day. Yeah.
As flawed as it was, I liked it. Speaking of flawed, and maybe I didn't quite like it so much, let's talk briefly about Joker. Folie
it opens today. Joker, how do you say it? Folie à deux?
Folie à deux. It means madness times two, essentially.
Okay.
And it stars, as you can see, Joaquin Phoenix as writer-director Todd Phillips' version of DC Comics' Joker, Batman's archenemy. The movie that preceded this, called Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck, failed stand-up comic, brutalized party clown and eventual murderer, was a massive success. It's kind of like an Elseworlds version of the DC villain, and purports to make him sympathetic. And if you saw it, you know that it, in large part, evokes Martin Scorsese's King of Comedy. There are aspects of it that really parallel King of Comedy, but Joker worked on a number of different levels. This sequel finds Arthur Fleck in jail awaiting trial for the murders he committed, a spoiler alert, on television, on a talk show. And he is in a facility, maybe for the criminally insane, maybe it's just a standard prison, but it is adjacent to an asylum where people aren't necessarily criminals. And in a great leap of plausibility, in other words, rather implausible, a frenemy guard in his prison, played by the great Brendan Gleeson, brings him to a choir rehearsal in the other facility where he meets Harleen Quinzel, Lee, who is basically the Harley Quinn character in this movie. And of course, sparks fly, they fall in love. The movie goes on to, show what happens when he finally comes to trial. There's an attempt to see if he's, in control of his faculties, if he's fit, is there a split personality situation? There are song and dance numbers that pop up. It just does not hold together. Lady Gaga as Lee Quinzel, the Harley Quinn character, is wonderful. She's got a beautiful singing voice. They sing a lot of standards. Joaquin Phoenix doesn't even try to sing. I mean, he sings, but I don't know if you could call it singing. And throughout, their chemistry may be good, but how things play out is just kind of so haphazard. It just doesn't really cohere for some reason. And, again, I'm rooting for it, even though I'm not a big fan of these recalibrations and I guess, like I said, Elseworlds versions of the characters. But the first movie had power, and this thing kind of fritters a little bit of that away. Joker, folie à deux, hard to recommend it. I guess, Gaga's great. Let's put it that way. I wish it had been better.
The performances were good. Phoenix is a brilliant actor. Was he good?
Yeah, but he isn't given enough to work with that makes any sense. And again, all this implausible stuff happens. And I know there are fantasy moments where they're bursting into song, and a few of them are quite stirring and exciting. But for some reason, it just doesn't work. By the way, Catherine Keener plays Arthur's psychiatrist. Steve Coogan shows up to interview Arthur Fleck prior to his trial, and Coogan is basically doing Piers Morgan. And I kind of like that little sequence, but ultimately it just didn't work. For me, I had quibbles with that, Saturday Night, but ultimately I can recommend it. The quibbles in terms of Joker, folie à deux, just a bridge too far, if you will.
All right. Wow. It was a much anticipated offering, the sequel to The Joker. But Michael says just not enough there to.
Let's briefly talk about a few more films before we head into the weekend. Hold Your Breath is sort of a Western horror movie set in the Oklahoma Dust Bowl in the 1930s, where a mother, well played by the great and always impressive actress Sarah Paulson, is trying to protect her two daughters. Her husband has gone off to try to earn money, working on the railroad or something. And the two girls, one of whom is deaf and mute, and mom are barricading against the constant dust storms. And there is kind of a local mythology that there's a creature called the Gray Man who is made out of the dust and can infiltrate your house and, take control of your mind and body. And that is where a lot of the horror lurks. And we try to, fight off those urges. But I guess in the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, when you're basically a mom alone with her daughters and worried about your well-being, things can haunt you. Things can kind of bend your mind.
What was the guy called? The Dust Man?
The Gray Man.
Oh, the Gray Man. Okay.
Made of dust. Supporting players include the great Broadway actress Anna Lee Ashford, who, by the way, was in Masters of Sex and really good in that. She plays like a neighboring woman who's also on her own with her kids, and her kids are having problems.
She was great in Kinky Boots, too, I think, on Broadway. Yeah.
She's fantastic. Eben Moss Bacharach, cousin on The Bear, plays a kind of a roving preacher who shows up who may or may not be a villain. Maybe he's channeling the gray man. Maybe the gray man is just, only in mom's mind. It's an atmospheric and somewhat effective horror movie. It's not great, but Paulson is so wonderful. Moss Bacharach is great. The kids are good. And there is a creep factor. This, to me, when it comes to streaming, is probably something you might want to watch on a Saturday night. Again, not great, but it's okay.
And it's streamer on Hulu. Is that what you're saying?
It's on Hulu, yeah. So it's easy to watch.
All right. What else do you have? A great culture blaster.
A much better movie with a fantastic central performance is The Outrun. And I'll just say briefly, Saoirse Ronan plays a young woman who has been living in London. She's living the wild life. She's hitting the Hackney discos. She's got a boyfriend, and she has a serious drinking problem. I mean, a serious drinking problem, and it renders her absolutely unlikable. A friend of mine said, Saoirse Ronan playing someone unlikable? Oh, yeah. But what's good about this is she goes back to her roots in the Scottish Highlands, out by the turbulent seas that are abutting Scotland, and she tries to kind of clean up her act because things have gone to hell in London for her. And she's dealt with childhood family trauma. Her father has issues. Her mom has become very religious. And, this is a farm girl who's now been to the big city and has to rediscover what's good about herself. It's a healing journey to sobriety thing. And it's depicted in a very creative and occasionally fractured way by the director, Nora Fingscheidt, who also co-wrote the movie. And so this woman, fresh out of rehab, goes to this windswept Scottish community, and she decides to actually be a part of a conservation group there. And this personal quest for tranquility and purpose that comes in the aftermath of the debilitating alcoholism is rather moving. And what a lovely performance by Saoirse Ronan. She is one of the great actors of her generation. This is quite stark and beautiful in terms of the cinematography. And again, it bounces back and forth between her, troubles in London and the things she had to deal with while growing up as a farm girl in this remote area. I thought it was pretty powerful stuff.
Well, it's being compared, the sort of journey to sobriety or the descent into those things that are associated with not being sober, being compared to Nick Cage in Leaving Las Vegas. Is that at all a comparable depiction, or is that just a kind of a... That's all that was being referenced in the chat.
To an extent, but not the fact that she returns to nature and she embraces that beautiful windswept land and finds herself in isolation and rediscovers kind of purpose and confronts her addiction. That stuff it's its own thing. I thought it was lovely, and I thought it was definitely worth seeing.
It's called The Outrun, and it's in theaters.
It is in theaters. Quickly, I want to mention, you always like to point out that I'm fine with those foreign films, and I love Quentin Dupieux. He is one of the most interesting. He's either French or Belgian. I don't know. I'm assuming he's French. He makes like crazy movies, and he has delivered a hilarious comedy called Dali with a lot of A's, and it's about Salvador Dali, and it's about a young French journalist who's trying to interview him. And Dali is played by a variety of different actors. Edouard Baird, Gilles Lelouch. There's an older Dali. There's a younger Dali. He's incredibly difficult to deal with, and Anais de Moustier plays the young journalist, and she's wonderful. And it's very surreal and bizarre and dreamlike. And I just thought it was a fresh, original. And we've seen a few things dealing with Salvador Dali, the great surrealist painter, in the past number of years. This is another one. But man, I enjoyed this immensely. Again, French with subtitles, but totally rollicking comedy and crazy, fully crazy.
Wow, that's great. So you leave us with a little bit of a foreign sophistication, don't you, Culture Blaster?
I do what I can. One quick note for television viewers: The Penguin, which is a spinoff of Matt Reeves' The Batman that starred Robert Pattinson, was a gritty sort of realistic kind of look at what it would be like if Batman existed in the real world. The Penguin was one of the villains in that, and kind of depicted as not as a caricature really, but as a damaged individual, played brilliantly by Colin Farrell, unrecognizably so. And this spin-off series on HBO Max, that's right, I called it HBO Max. All right, we'll call it Max, is a tour de force for Colin Farrell, and also playing against type, the wonderful Kristen Milioti as Sophia Falcone, the daughter of Carmine Falcone, the gang boss that dies in the Batman movie, as she tries to maneuver to take over the family business, which of course is crime. And Colin Farrell is great. So it's a gritty crime drama, despite, again, inspired by a DC Comics villain and adversary to the Batman, the Penguin.
Wow, isn't that wild? Also, it's interesting because I've seen that poster when I'm on HBO Max or whatever they call it now, and it does look intriguing. Colin Farrell, I'll have to check it out based on the Culture Blaster's overwhelming endorsement of it. I've seen this from a couple of others, Michael. Phineas is saying, ask the Culture Blaster to quickly mention Tulsa King Season 2, The Penguin, which you just have mentioned, and The Old Man Season 2. I guess those are favorites, all three of Phineas.
The Old Man is wonderful, and it stars Jeff Bridges, who has grown into such a comfortable character lead. It's a treat. We don't have the time to get into great depth. I'll be straight up. I have not watched Sly Stallone and Tulsa King, but people speak highly of it.
Yeah, there you go. But here are the other offerings that Michael brought this day. He brought The Penguin, as he just mentioned, the Colin Farrell-led project where Colin Farrell plays that penguin character. He says it's gritty and it's real and it's good. He likes it.
The prosthetic makeup is unbelievable because they don't look like makeup and they don't look like Colin Farrell, but you buy the character.
That's The Penguin. It's on Max. Dali, the Salvador Dali story, with several different actors playing Dali through this project. It is French with English subtitles, with Quentin Dupieux in the lead role. And
no, he's the writer. He's writer-director. He's the guy, the madman behind this thing.
I see. Okay. Well, I didn't know who he was anyway. So should I know who he is, Quentin Dupieux?
Yeah, man, he makes amazing and crazy and surreal films, which I'll give you a list off air. Great stuff.
Thank you.
What?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just a dumb American. So what can I tell you? I just
you cannot say you love your country.
If it's not featured on NASCAR, I don't know what it is. All right, so the Outrun is the Saoirse Ronan film. She is playing someone unlikable, Michael says, which is amazing because you so want to like this great actress. And you will like this great actress playing the unlikable character in her journey of self-discovery from insobriety to sobriety. And apparently that journey is, in its own way, intoxicating. The Outrun, it's called. The Outrun. It's in theaters now. He really liked it. The other films he reviewed, Hold Your Breath. That is the Sarah Paulson film. It takes place during the Dust Bowl era, and indeed she's in the Dust Bowl. And she's protecting her two children from the dust storms that are so brutal, and from the legendary Gray Man, who's been spoken of as a supernatural creature that comes to life and can affect life during these various dust storms. It sounds intense.
Yeah, but he may be for real, and maybe he's only in their minds.
Yes,
but yeah,
it could be a concoction of their own fearful psychology.
they're dusty fears.
Hold Your Breath is on Hulu now to be streamed. Joker, Folie à Deux. Director Todd Phillips' bite at the apple again. The Batman villain headed up the first one Joaquin Phoenix did with great effect. It was a very popular film. I think it was acclaimed as such. In this case, the Culture Blaster is saying Phoenix is great, Gaga is great, but the script just isn't there. He feels there's just not enough to this. And he feels as well that understanding how you have to suspend some belief, and maybe in several instances along the way of a film, you might have to suspend some belief several times. This just requires a bit too much of the audience with limited payoff. He really just didn't think that this Joker sequel hit the mark. Is that a fair way to summarize it?
You are dead on with that one, Mark.
And finally, he started with Saturday Night. This is the telling of the Saturday Night Live story, and it has a number of high-profile people involved in it, but more to the point, Michael really felt as though everyone hit their marks quite well in this project and told the story of Saturday Night Live with a kind of both virtuosity and reality, that is a reflection of reality, that it felt veritas, it felt real, it felt authentic, and he really was impressed with the work that was done to tell this story. Saturday Night will be in theaters on October 11th. Yes?
My only caveats was their need to constantly fold in familiar skits that were from down the road or aspects of that to kind of give it the full SNL, if you know what I mean.
I see. So to kind of remind us that, yeah, there was a comedy with... I was always hoping that you would reference this in your review, that what was it called? Was it a Sorkin thing, or I forget who was
I brought it up. The Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. This does what that show tried to do.
Right. I mean, that's why I said you referenced it. Yeah, I just couldn't remember the name of it. But that's great that you feel like this hit the mark, because I thought that did miss the mark, as you said. What's that, Culture Blaster? Anything else? That and Booty, which is south of Market in San Francisco, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm still holding down the fort here in SF. Hope to be back in LA by November. Meanwhile, our 49ers go to war against the Arizona Cardinals. Brock Purdy has finally opened up the eyes of national sports media and is cutting through their bias about him being the last guy drafted. But, if he makes one misstep, they'll be back saying, oh, he's not really that good. Well, let's see what happens on Sunday. Let's put it that way.
I'm thinking, Michael, you're in San Francisco. We are coming to San Francisco for the fall show. It's at Fort Mason, and Courtney will be with me. And tickets are a little more than $20, but you get 25% off with the Mark discount, capital M-A-R-K. You go to eventbrite.com. Use the discount code MARK, M-A-R-K, and we'll be knocking around there, I think, the first day of the San Francisco Fall Show, as it's called. You can read about it at sffallshow.org. I believe the first day is a Thursday, and then it's a week from this coming Thursday, and then we'll be there Friday as well. So I think Thursday we'll really be knocking around there. And I'd like to invite you, Michael, and you know what? Kim is going to buy your ticket for you, and that is really so sweet of her.
I can't believe that. I was going to use the Culture Blaster discount, but whatever. We'll go with Kim.
Kim is being so generous.
Who is having that conversation?
Kim is having it. I didn't bring it up. I was amazed at her generosity.
I look forward to any time spent with you and Courtney, so we'll see how that plays out. And in the meantime, people can check out my articles at thevoicesf.org. There's a new one up right now. And man, I'm looking forward to next Friday on the Mark Thompson Show.
I love it. The enthusiasm, the magic, the dreaminess of a man who comes and goes on a rainbow. He's the culture blaster, Michael Snyder. Thank you, Michael. We love you.
Everybody.
Keep on.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.